Hi everyone, welcome to another video. Today I want to share with you this card I made where I did some dry embossing with my stencils. But first I want to remind you to follow me across social media if you haven't already. Those links are going to be down in the description box below. Also, while you are down there, if you have not already, you can subscribe to my channel. And if you enjoy this video, the thumbs up button always helps. I'll be using both of these stencils from the Crafters Workshop, and I want to remind you that all the supplies that I'll be using today will be listed in the description box down below, so you can easily find what I'm using if you want to recreate this card. To do this technique, I am using my Big Kick today, and I have my regular die cutting sandwich. So I have my multi-purpose platform, both tabs down, then I have a cutting plate on top of that. Then on top of my cutting plate, I've put 3 pieces of felt. This is just the regular felt you can buy in the kids craft section. I've cut up a few pieces, cut them in half, and I've layered up 3 layers of the felt. On top of the felt, I've put a piece of white cardstock. This is heavyweight white cardstock. It's 110 pounds. And then on top of my cardstock, I'm going to go ahead and place my stencil. This is the 6x6 Fantastical stencil. And right on top of that, I'm going to go ahead and place my top cutting pad. I'll run this through my die cutting machine. You are going to want to test your die cutting machine to see how many pieces of felt you're going to need underneath your piece of cardstock to do this technique. Sometimes your machine can have more pressure, sometimes it's going to have less pressure, so you need to kind of play around with how many pieces you put under there. You can also put a few pieces of cardstock underneath your regular cardstock you're embossing on top of. That's going to add more pressure, but it's not going to be as thick as the felt. There is a closer look at that all embossed. It's such a neat technique. It's not going to be as raised of an area as you would get with an embossing folder, but it's such a nice effect. It's kind of subtle, especially on the white backgrounds, but it's just, I like it a lot better than embossing folders if I'm being completely honest. Now you can do this technique with any kind of cardstock. Here I did it with some craft cardstock, and I used the floral spectacle stencil, which is just gorgeous. There you can see I've got that nice raised area. You can also use the debossed area, so turn it around and use that back side. To get this one to stand out a little bit more, or just to add a little bit more interest, because it really does stand out on its own, I went ahead and lined up the stencil right over the top of the embossed areas, and then I'm just adding a little bit of ink right over the top of it. I'm using this Rose Petals ink from Catherine Pooler and one of my makeup blending brushes that I love so much. I'm just putting that ink right through the stencil like you would any other time. It's just going to end up on the raised areas where I did my dry embossing. Just be sure whenever you're putting the ink through, you don't put too much pressure down so you don't push any of those raised areas kind of down and lose a little bit of their embossed look. There's a closer look at that finished panel. Now this one I did not turn into a card. However, it's easily turned into a card just by adding a sentiment and putting the whole thing on a card base. For my second panel, I wanted to add a little bit of color, so I used the Sheer Shimmer Spritz. This is in the rose gold color. It not only adds just the greatest shimmer look on the background, but it also adds just the tiniest bit of color. It almost gives more of a handmade paper look. There you can see I've got that nice embossed area that now has the greatest shimmer on it. Whenever I do this technique, I like to try and make sure that I let the background shine through. For this card, I didn't want the sentiment to cover up the background too much, so I decided to make a vellum banner. I cut a piece of vellum into a rectangle. This is about 3 inches by 4 inches long. Then I just cut up straight from the bottom, right from the middle bottom, and then from both corners, I cut towards that center cut. And there I've got the great banner ready to go on my sentiment. There you can see it doesn't cover up the embossing at all. It just lets it shine through. It just kind of dulls it a little bit. For my banner, I'm going to go ahead and stamp on my sentiment. Because I'm stamping on vellum, I am using this new ink. This is called Stays On Pigment ink, so you can heat emboss with it, but I'm actually just going to use it as is and stamp on my vellum. It's going to dry, it's not going to rub off or anything, and it doesn't take forever to dry. You do have that little bit of playtime because it is a pigment ink. However, it still dries very nice and quickly, so you're not going to smear it around. And once it dries, it's not going to go anywhere. I'm using the Hello Lovely stamp set from Concord and Ninth for my sentiment today. So I stamped Lovely right at the bottom of that banner. And this is the chocolate brown Stays On pigment ink. And then right above that, I'm going to go ahead and stamp the Hello from that same Hello Lovely stamp set. And I'll just go ahead and quickly ink up my stamp and stamp it down above. To clean this off, you can use Stays On cleaner, or you can use a bit of alcohol. That works too. So once I stamp that down, I like to leave it for just a second to transfer over, then carefully peel it up, and there's my lovely sentiment all ready to go. To attach my vellum, I needed somewhere to put some adhesive to hide it. What I decided to do was actually take a little bit of paper adhesive. This is just paper tape. It's about a 1/2 inch wide. I get mine from Amazon because it is cheaper there. I will go ahead and leave a link down in the description box below to the adhesive that I buy. It comes in a 4-pack, all different widths. It's great. So I put a strip of that right along the top of the banner, peeled off the backing paper once I had cut the edges flush with the banner itself. And I'm going to add some Wow glitter. This is kind of a champagne-y color. It's just gorgeous, but it matches that rose gold really well. It almost does look like a rose gold glitter. Sometimes I can't tell the difference between a champagne and a rose gold, to be honest. So I went ahead and put some of that glitter right over the adhesive. Then I'll just put a piece of cardstock. This is scrap cardstock right over the top of that, and use my bone folder to really press that into the adhesive. Make sure it's stuck there. Whatever is left over that doesn't stick down, you can just put onto your piece of scrap paper and funnel it back into your container so you don't have any waste with this. I like to go ahead and give it a good brush and a good flicks from behind to make sure all that glitter is off, so it's not going to go rubbing off onto your fingers or anything. But once I had the glitter on there, you can see I could add adhesive behind there, and you can't even see it now, which is fantastic. A little quick tip to clean up that glitter that gets on your craft mat. I like to use one of those rollers that's meant for pet hair, and I just quickly roll up my glitter, and it works for embossing powder too. Just a little quick tip. Now for the vellum, I added some fun foam right to where that glitter strip is, and I'll go ahead and pop that right onto the top of the panel. And that's the only adhesive that I did put on there. So the bottom has no adhesive. You can still pull up that banner. Then finally, I'm going to go ahead and attach the entire thing to an A2 top folding card base. I also did use a few little enamel accents from Ranger in the potting soil color. Those are no longer available, but they do make brown Nuvo drops, which I will leave the link down in the description box as well. There's a closer look at the finished card. That is going to do it for me today. There are links on the left side of your screen you can click on. You can also subscribe to my channel over there as well. Don't forget all the information down in the description box. Thank you for watching, and happy crafting.